In the previous episode of the Method School series, I filmed in a body of water that these waters are inhabited by selected large-sized fish. Even then, I promised myself that I would like to show the other side of the coin as well. By this, I mean method fishing on association waters. Because, after all, how is an association water different from an intensively stocked lake? Well, in quite a few different ways, but let's just talk a bit about this for a moment. What the management of an association lake actually looks like? Generally speaking, the management here works like this, that the members pay the annual membership fee, and in addition, if there is an option for day ticket fishing, then from that as well, from the revenue generated by selling day tickets. And from all this, they basically have to maintain the lake's surroundings, as well as, of course, the fish stock. It is very important to mention that on these association waters, you shouldn't be surprised that here, every single member feels the water is a bit their own, because on this lake too, where I am now, the way the environment looks is primarily thanks to the members, because a lot of volunteer work hours have gone into making the environment look like this by many dedicated people. So those who are members here really and truly consider it their own precious little child, which I think is perfectly fine. And if a guest angler comes here, like I am now, then you really do need to behave as a guest here. And well, it's appropriate to behave as expected in this situation. By the way, if someone really comes here wanting to get to know the lake and its surroundings, they are received with endless helpfulness. At least that's what happened here today. Now, let's see what the situation is with the fish stock in lakes like this. I don't think it's a secret if I say that to waters like these, both members and day ticket anglers are usually people who like to take home a portion of their catch so they can process it and eat it there. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does determine what kinds of fish live in the lake. After all, in a fishery lake, the process is mainly that whatever fish are taken out of the lake, whether by members or day anglers, those are restocked, and primarily from specimens that can meet the daily quota. So for example, where I am, this is the lake of the Gyúró Fishing Association, but I'll talk about this in more detail later. Here, for instance, there is a lower size limit and also an upper size limit in order to ensure that the lake's core stock is not harmed, and most of the fish are within this size range. These are very beautiful fish, by the way, and they're really suitable for culinary use. This is the fate of these fish, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's also important to mention that lakes of this kind actually aren't necessarily just about catching fish. You see, when we go fishing, we go to fish, we take it seriously, thinking that we'll catch a lot of fish and enjoy ourselves because the rod tip bends a lot. However, on waters like these, on such association-managed waters, there is a very active community life as well. Since the members here mostly come from the surrounding towns and villages to fish, and everyone knows everyone else. People come here to be together, to chat, to spend the day together. They organize really great little events here, so life is definitely happening here. So these kinds of waters play a very important role in building community. But in the same way, it also brings them together with our society, as I mentioned earlier. This level of cooperation is actually very appealing, that they operate such a water area together in unison as a community. But let's move on, not with the topic, but I'm moving on myself. I'm going to stop a bit further back here. There's a good spot over there because I was told that it's a good spot, so I have to sit there. I still have to push my cart over there, unpack, and then we'll dive into how and why it's truly worth carefully approaching method fishing on this particular type of water. All right, let's go, mount up. The lake where I am about to fish is managed by the Gyúró Fishing Association. It is the Gyúró fishing lake, which currently has a little over 200 active members. Visitors are greeted by a very beautiful, well-maintained environment, especially now in May when nature is waking up. At this time, the area under the forest is particularly beautiful. But that field over there is also very striking and lovely. But what I think interests anglers much more than this is how many fish are in the lake. I think even the older members can't say exactly, because it's probably no secret that here too the stock is constantly changing. The fish that are taken out are carefully replaced, and that's how the fish population in the lake is managed. However, there are naturally large fish in the lake, since the core stock is protected too, for fish over 5 kilos. So for carp longer than 55 centimeters, exceeding that size, it is forbidden to take them home. So there are already some sizable specimens in the lake. By the way, I saw quite a lot of photos about this, which the local anglers showed me here in the morning. But obviously the average size is this 2 to 3 kilo so-called kitchen carp. So how should you even start fishing on waters like these? Well, first of all, you have to acknowledge that in lakes like this, there is most likely a lower fish density than in intensive waters. So this kind of fishing requires completely different bait, and you need to use entirely different tactics and techniques. Okay, I'm going to fish with the method, but a bit differently than I would on an intensive water. And of course, if we're seeing this lake for the first time, there are certain things that are worth finding out even before you start fishing. So in the morning, or from the warden, or by gathering useful information from local anglers that could be helpful to decide where we should even sit down to fish at this lake. But what are these questions exactly? The first and most important one, in my opinion, is to find out how deep the water is in this lake and whether there are any irregularities on the lake bed. Well, I already asked about these things this morning, that's for sure, that on that side, water enters the lake from the stream through a transfer pump. And right behind me is where it flows out. So the water is a bit deeper here, but there isn't any significant difference in depth. The second question is whether the lake bed is muddy. That's important because it can influence where the fish are located, and it can also affect the choice of fishing technique. I found out that in this area, right here under the forest, the lake bed is particularly muddy here, while the region on the opposite side is not as much. So I decided to sit here in the mud. I don't know why, I just simply like this spot. So we'll see what I can make of it. The next question is, which are actually the most frequented fishing spots? This area here is popular, of course, but the most popular spot on the lake is the one opposite, though I'm not sure it's opposite. But over there across the field, the spots under the meadow are called the Golden Shore, by the way. Most of the members sit there to fish, and there's only one reason for that. It's close to the parking lot. That's pretty much it. So the next important thing to know is whether the fish get any kind of feed. No, here they don't get anything. Only what the anglers bring in, that's what the fish eat, along with their natural food sources that are available. It's also very important to know whether there are any snags in the water, which could obviously hinder our fishing. Well, what is visible are, of course, the water circulators and their surroundings, which may contain snags. These are actually necessary because due to the silty bottom in the somewhat murkier water, they are afraid of fish die-offs. And when the weather is stagnant like it was when we arrived today, that's when they turn them on to get the water moving. But the main point is that there are no other visible snags in the lake. Of course, there are invisible ones everywhere. Here, by the way, just a few meters behind me, about 8-10 meters away, there are supposedly some stumps in the water. Well, I can neither confirm nor deny that. I don't know, I believe they're there, and we'll see whether they cause any problems or not. Another important thing when putting together the bait mix is how much of a nuisance the presence of small fish really is. By that I mean silver crucian carp, bream, bleak, whether these fish interfere with the fishing. Basically, the lake has a very good population of predatory fish, so these smaller fish are kept in check, and there are also a lot of beautiful turtles living in the water, which also bother these small fish, but overall, they are not at all a nuisance for carp anglers. With this information in mind, it becomes much easier for us to determine the course of fishing, our tactics, and the choice of bait. Because, of course, you can also fish on a lake like this by mixing up some method feed. I just cast it out somewhere, and then sooner or later I'll get a bite, or maybe not. But you can also try to guide the fish, gather them in one spot, and give the whole process a structure in order to ensure we have an enjoyable fishing experience. I'll show you in a moment what kinds of ground bait and attractants you'll need. One thing's for sure, even if it's not necessarily more complicated, there will definitely be more things on your tray than at an intensive fishing spot. A very important question was left out of the previous list, namely whether there are any specific restrictions or rules regarding how much bait or what quality or what kind of bait content can be introduced into the water at the fishing lake. Well, the local rule here is that the dry material used for fishing purposes cannot exceed 2 kilograms. That's a lot for method fishing, but if you want to create a feeding area, it's not much. But in any case, this rule must be respected. Now, what I have brought and prepared here is all laid out nicely. Let's start from left to right. This here is cold pressed corn germ pellet. This will be used for feeding, specifically because it has a natural pure corn flavor. And I'm sure the fish have already encountered this before. Well, at least the corn. Next to it is champion corn black with half a bag poured out there. Its purpose will be essentially to absorb the corn germ pellet as well as the sweet corn, and by mixing it all together, I will throw the feed into the water. The reason it needs to be black is because I'm not sure that if I were to spread a large yellow base there, it would turn out well. With black, there can't be much trouble, but it still has a nice corn scent. What you see next to it is sweet corn. I opened 3 cans of it. I think this still fits within the allowed amount according to the regulations. And here you can also actually see Tornado Micro Pellet Smoked Champion Corn. As you know, this is a corn-based water, so at club lakes, corn is clearly the dominant attractant. But you still need something a bit heavier, and it's not a problem if it contains fish meal. The main thing is that it stays in the method feeder, something in the filling that the fish can suck onto, even if the small fish might have already scattered the lighter particles. Speaking of light particles, Tornado Method Mix Smoked Champion Corn, this will also be mixed in. His job will be to ensure that in this murky water, the fluorescent green dissolution attracts the fish's attention and directs them to the center of the method feeder. So these are what will be introduced, and now I'm going to mix them together. Well, this is what the mixture looks like. It contains corn germ pellets, sweet corn, and of course champion corn black. This is half a bag, but it still makes up quite a large amount. I'm going to introduce this in the form of bowls for feeding, using a pellet feeder complete basket at 40 meters. I've already measured out this distance, by the way. I'm not going to spread out the feeding, I'll throw it all in at once. And the reason for that is because here the fish are probably not used to having things splashing above them. It will take at least 1-2 hours before any fish find their way back to the feeding spot, which is exactly why I'm only doing this at 40 meters, so that I can fish more distant, calmer area, so to speak, using method feeder tactics as a searching angler. The first part of the fishing session will probably be this kind of patient method style fishing. And then by the time the fish settle on the feeding spot, or when they finally do, it might turn into an active, exciting fishing session. But there will be another feeding spot as well, but I'll talk about that later. For now, I'm sending this out to them. It is also very important to only use as many grains and corn germ pellets as you can still throw in with it. So the bait should, for example, be able to hold and stick together and form a solid lump. If you overdo it with seeds and the pellets inside, then it won't stick together and you won't be able to shape it into a ball. You can't throw it in and you'll scatter the feed everywhere. If you're using so little feed, your casting needs to be pinpoint accurate. I finished the heavy feeding. At this distance, no more feed will be put in today. Even so, I really bombarded the water over there, so I doubt anything will wander over for the next hour and a half or two. But after that, I expect there will be fish on it. But to pass the time in the meantime, remote methodizing will take place. Now, what do I mean by long distance here? Since judging by the cross-section of the lake, I think it would even be possible to cast 150 meters here. But I don't want to cast that far, and besides, I can't anyway. What I can reach with the gear I have out here is about 90 or 80 meters, which is more than enough, since the fish have no reason to be at 130 meters, or at least no more reason to be at 130 meters than at 80 or 90. I only cast out that far because here at 40 meters I've been casting into the water, making splashes, being noisy. So maybe I'll find a few fish in that calm zone while my baited area matures. Now, a crucial point of this type of fishing is to choose equipment that is suitable for muddy water, or more precisely for shallow muddy water. The basket is the key here. You shouldn't use a heavy basket. You shouldn't use these small feeders weighing 60, 70 or 80 grams. Even though you can cast more accurately with them, here for fishing close in, accuracy isn't needed. What you need is to make sure the cast is executed smoothly and that the line clip releases. It doesn't matter where, as long as the line clip releases, then we place the feeder on the water. Let it sink carefully, follow it until it reaches the bottom, and once it's on the substrate, from there we shouldn't move our light little feeder anymore. Let it sit on top of the silt and start dissolving there. Then if something swims by, we'll catch it, and if not, we cast again. This is basically what this kind of searching fishing is about on waters like these. Now I'll bait the hooks and cast both rods. Then we'll talk about what kind of baits are worth using on these association waters. Finally, something pulled from the inside spot. There really weren't many bites at that distance. After many casts, something finally happened. By the way, I reduced the hook size, which helped, so it's worth paying attention to this as well. Because if the lake bed is muddy, you shouldn't go too big with the hook size either. It's almost certainly a carp, not too big, but definitely a carp. Obviously, it swam under the other line. So to be honest, this close-in fishing isn't all that convincing to me. So it's possible that after an hour of fishing, I'll already move out to the 40-meter range, because with two rods I'm forcing this mid-range around 80-90 meters. And yes, there are bites, but I think there's so much silt in there that the fish simply can't find the hook, only very rarely, as the attached example shows. So I'm about to actually start this 40-meter fishing session right now. But before that, I'll go ahead and bait up another spot just to be sure, so I don't end up putting all of the rest of the afternoon's effort on just one card. That's it. So, here in the feeder basket is still the pellet mix. This shows the fish the way. where it needs to suck around. By the way, this is the size that is mostly found in this lake and also in most average club waters. Here, in the corner of its mouth, is the little specie-corn. Well, yes, it really did absolutely need this feather-light bait. It's clear that this one has been hooked before. This size is typical. This healthy, properly sized little carp is my first fish from the Gyúró lake, but I'm sure it won't be the last. Since here we don't take the fish away but release them back, then it's worth disinfecting the wound caused by the hook. Although this isn't a hook wound, at least it wasn't caused by my hook. But it's still a good idea to treat it a bit and then release the little fish back so it can keep swimming. All right, come on back. Oh, the water is so nice and warm. All right, off you go. Well, you know, that's it. If it's in the feed ingredients and in baits where the sweet corn flavor dominates, it is worth using such bait. In this case, it's the award-winning tornado smoke method. Champion corn pellet, which is small in size but all the more truly eye-catching because its color is bright yellow, and when thrown into the water it releases a fluorescent green smoke. That's why it's easily visible even in this murky water. Obviously the ground bait also smokes, and so does the bait, and together the two create such a strong visual stimulus for the fish that they have to come and see what's near the feeder. But if this doesn't work, or if it doesn't bring any fish, or if you need a bait with even greater buoyancy for the hook, then I've also brought along this tutti frutti flavored specie corn limited edition version. In this pack there's the regular corn-sized version, there's the large version, the mega version, and there are pink and yellow corn imitations as well. If the simple little pellet doesn't work, then I'll put this on. For now I'm not trying any other baits. I trust that these will work well, so there's no need to overcomplicate this bait thing, even on waters like these. On waters with muddy bottoms like this, it's worth using different flavors as well, and that's because no matter how skillfully and nicely we cast, even then, a thin layer of sediment or silt will settle on the contents of our feeder. What I have here on my tray now is the Champion Corn Activator Gel and the Champion Corn Activator Spray. Both of them are the smoke version, so they create a visible cloud, but it's worth knowing that when the ground bait itself creates such a large cloud, then the visual effect of the aroma is not so dominant anymore. But it gives a much more active and intense flavor to our feeder if it contains this, and the fish will find it even under a thin layer of silt. So it's worth trying these as well in such situations. Something just suddenly pulled the 380 rod with force inside as well, right in front of us. It seems to be a better carp. Now we'll see if there's a stump at the edge here or not, because that's where my fish is now. Up to this point, it came in quickly after the first run, but now it's being stubborn here. Wow. I think that if I manage to land this fish, it will be a fitting end to this, well, how should I put it? Nice, but a bit more monotonous searching session. And I'll start fishing right here, specifically in the 40-meter zone and also in the shoreline zones. I somehow have more faith in that. The water is still warming up. I think the carp are nearby here, and the ones that are further out, as I said, they're just kind of messing around. They don't really want to take the bait. This so-called messing around is actually a classic expression, often used for those situations when someone is present, they're there, but something about it just isn't quite right. It's not exactly as it should be. But this fish didn't really mess around. It took it. Come on then, if you're ready. Where are you? Oh. Nice little mirror carp. Well, this is in fact the actual size. We'll see how big they get at the feeding spot. I've been fishing here for about an hour and not too many fish have shown any interest in my bait. And in my opinion, the clear reason for this is that the bottom is very muddy in there. There are some fish swimming through, some smaller and bigger nudges, but there are very few proper bites. It's clear that the fish can't stand being dragged out of the mud. However, I've already seen fish turning here near the shore, and I still have some of this bait left that I can use. This one and that one, I'll use these to prepare a small feeding spot right here, very close to the shore. Besides, the area close to the shore is quite firm, as the president of the association mentioned that they dredged it a bit here not too long ago. Well, obviously it's been a few years now, so I'll go ahead and scatter this here now. And maybe, just maybe, later this afternoon, there will be some carp out here feeding on it. I'm actually quite sure there will be, because I saw them turning just like that. This way, at least I won't be fishing only at the 40-meter distance on the lake, but maybe right here under my feet as well. Something will bring in some fish. Well, this should be enough to start with. To be honest, the afternoon did not go as I expected, because instead of my feeding spot building up, I honestly felt like there were simply fish there, actually quite a few, but somehow they weren't eating, or they weren't going down to the bottom, or I don't know, but honestly the whole afternoon period just felt really, really strange. The tip of the rod was constantly moving, but I'm convinced that it wasn't actually my rig that the fish were near, but rather that they were up at the surface, and I struggled with this all day, trying to figure out how in some way I could lure the fish closer to my rig and catch them there. Sometimes I did manage to do it. I'm not saying I didn't, but honestly, I was expecting more than this. And it's very clear that I was mainly able to hook only the smaller fish, not the bigger ones. Even though there are quite a few bigger ones in the lake, and among the smaller ones, there are some larger ones as well. By this I mean those small take-home size fish, the 3 kilo, 4 kilo specimens, which simply just didn't get hooked for me this time. I'm actually sure that the fish are up at the surface of the water, and that's why I'm unable to lure them down. Now it's already afternoon, late afternoon, and maybe now there's some activity down there, but even now it takes a very long time for them to take the bait. Obviously, this sudden warming that's happening now isn't favorable for fishing, but that's how it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles, so things can't always be perfect. I should net this one, but the landing net is as far away from here as it could possibly be right now. Right now it's really that kind of fishing where I've been changing up the leader length, the leader thickness, hook size, bait size, basically everything, and the result was always exactly the same. Nothing. Then all of a sudden a fish came along. Then after that I kept changing things up again. A long time, nothing happened, then a fish came along. I'm not saying it was a bad fishing session. Just to be clear, this kind of fishing is perfectly fine just the way it is. It was just a bit of a rather unusual and strange situation. But hey, you know, that's just how things turned out this time, I suppose. Come on, that's it. That's it. For this one too, the hook was just barely set in the corner of its mouth, even though it's not a big hook. The small hook is definitely working much better now than the big one, but well, it's certainly quite an interesting day today, honestly. It rushed out so fast at the start, it almost tore the clip of the reel, but in the end, it's not even a giant. Angry. I am very angry too. You guys made me struggle for a long time today. With the method technique, the end tackle is quite limited in terms of what can actually be called traditional method fishing. But I'll still tell you what kind of end tackle I used for fishing. The heart of the whole setup is indeed an inline, line-guided Dart Pro aqua feeder. Actually, in this water, I could have even thrown in the black-colored one. It wouldn't have made any difference. Neither a disadvantage nor an advantage. Quite simply, this was what I had set up, so that's what I fished with. But what's much more important than the color of the feeder is its actual weight. On every single rod, I used a feeder of such size and weight that was the smallest possible for the given casting distance. So on the inside rod, which is now the 390 heavy fine method rod, I had the 50-gram feeder in size L on it, just like on my 3/8 medium heavy rod. That's what I used on those as well. And with these, I was casting about 80-90 meters with the smaller rods, which are here now. So with the 360 medium and the 330 light feeders, I have a 30-gram feeder on those. Oh, there's a bite right now. Because with that, I could very comfortably and easily reach the distance, the exact range where I was carefully baiting, waiting for the perfect opportunity. I won't go into detail about the hook, because this was exactly the kind of fishing where there was no good solution for the hook. There was a hook that worked once, but then it didn't work anymore because the fish got away. Then there was a hook that really didn't work at all because I found it too heavy and too big. So here I really had to experiment a lot with both the hook size and the hook type. But of course, a well-prepared angler always has some hooks tied and ready. Even I have at least 2 of each type, so I can at least try them all out for myself. And right now, what works really well is the KKMB type hook, which is a very light little hook, along with a tiny, delicate little champion corn wafter. This one is bringing in fish well this afternoon. I also tried the Spesicorn because it's lighter, but I don't think it worked as well today. But this little wafter is steadily bringing in the fish now. So you see, is there a good hook or not? Now this fish got away again. So what could have happened? I'll check my hook link right away. The fish simply slipped off the hook. So now it seems that this hook was good up until now because all the fish came out with it, but this one didn't. So is this hook good or not? On such unpredictable days, unfortunately, there are only half good solutions. So going through the rig components one by one, I just won't focus on the hook right now. So, as you can see, on these outer rods, there is a 30-40 gram feeder attached, while on the ones placed further in, today I used a 50 gram feeder. Another important component of the rig is the swivel, which allows rotation, and above it, this is the stopper for the quick change bead. Basically, that's all there is to the rig for method fishing here. There's really not much more to say, since you all know these already. As I said, the key issue here is the hook, but since I haven't figured that out yet, since I haven't found one that's 100% perfect, I tend to consider all of them as somewhat flawed for now. After losing the fish, I cast again with the same hook, and within just about a minute or so, I had another bite. I'm curious to see if I'll be able to land the fish this time. Maybe there really is some kind of stump here, because every little fish seems to get stubborn for some reason right here near the edge. So getting back to whether this is good or bad, that there isn't always a solution for every fishing day, or it's not 100%. I think this is what drives anglers and fishing forward all the time, that there's always something to think about, always something to refine, and always the search for perfection. Even though perfection doesn't exist, you can find something that comes close to perfect. Sometimes it happens that you only realize it at the very end of the day, or that's when the book opens up before you, revealing what exactly you need to do here. But when everything comes together, I think that's a really great feeling. When you go home thinking, yes, it was a tough fishing session, but in the end, it all worked out, or at least perhaps something managed to come together in some way. And if you manage to catch a fish on purpose, intentionally, that's already half the success. Come here, wow, what a beautiful fish. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier, about the average sized ones. Among them, there are quite a few beautiful ones like this, which just got snagged here on a rock. I'm not sure if you were able to hear it or not, but my automatic fish feeder actually got stuck for a moment, and now the fish have just managed to pull it out themselves. So you could actually hear the fishing line slowly sliding around in the snag, making a faint sound as it moved. Come here now. So much for whether there are snags or not. This wasn't a big snag, it was probably a small rock, but it was enough that I almost lost this beautiful fish. By the way, when I talked about the rigs and the equipment, I didn't mention that the necessity of which has just been proven by this fish out here among the reeds, namely that you always need some kind of shock leader, basically a casting leader. Even though I'm only casting 40 meters with it, and the 0.22 main line on the reel might be able to handle it, I still use a 0.30 Gyúró shield leader, because as you can see here too, the fish ran into a rock. You could hear the line scraping against it, and if there wasn't this shock leader, then I'm sure it definitely would have snapped my thin main line. So you always need to have a stronger shock leader, because you never know what might happen. Look at what a beautiful carp this is. Whoa, it's taking the other one too, damn. Please stay right here for the time being and don't go anywhere until I come back. It's important that you remain in this spot for now, so just wait patiently and I'll let you know when it's okay to move. Obviously, I also cast the short rod near the baited area because this particular hanging method honestly didn't really work today. Something actually dragged it away. By the way, since we're actually talking about the hanging method, I'd actually like to take a moment to carefully evaluate this whole tactic that I put together in my head. The fishing further out, this searching method, I don't really think it worked that well. I don't think I did anything wrong since I was casting nicely. I placed the bait very nicely, used some really good feed, but I just simply felt there were just too few fish. In the area where I cast, for me to be successful there with the method, that's the truth. This 40-meter feeding spot actually produced the most fish. It worked very well, it built up nicely. Although during the day, in the afternoon, there were periods when it was torture just to watch that the tip of the rod kept moving, but I wasn't catching any fish, while the poor fish in the cradle, well, I poured some water over it so it won't be harmed much. This 40-meter distance has now really come into its own by the evening, that's for sure. The hanging method was another big miss. I only got a small carp from it, and that's about it. So that's why it's always worth relying on several methods, several tactical elements, because one of them is bound to work. There's no such thing as that everything always works, because if everything worked, then we'd just stick with the first one and wouldn't even try a second method. So I see it this way. Out of the 3 options, only one of them actually worked. I think that's a pretty good ratio in fishing, and I'm about to net this fish too, because it's still wriggling in my other hand. All right, come here. Before I start getting comments about how the poor fish is suffering in the cradle while I'm playing with the other one, the fish is in the shade and covered by water. That's why I dare to tire it out like this, in the cradle, because the other fish is here and can't jump out since the net is placed over it. But this is a beautiful fish. What strength this fish has? Whoa. Now you can really see that the fish are feeding actively because none of them swallowed the hook this deep during the day, except for this one. All right, so I'll put this one next to the other. Even though this is an association water, still, if everything comes together and by the end of the day it becomes clear what exactly needs to be done, it's not uncommon for both rods to go off at the same time, or for a beautiful mirror carp like this, for a lovely common carp to take the bait. But the point is, if we are persistent and have a clear idea of what's actually happening right now in the water, then really, it's honestly not impossible. After catching 2 such fantastic fish, it already becomes clear what it is. That works particularly well today, since I've already managed to catch several fish with it. As you know, 2 things can go into the bait feeder, since I intended 2 things for my method feeder. One of them is the Tornado Micro Pellet Smoke Champion corn. By the way, there's actually also a bit of ground bait on it. The other one is pure Tornado Method Mixed Smoke Champion corn. Now I varied these by either capping the micro pellet with ground bait, casting only the ground bait, or casting only the micro pellet. And when the fish weren't biting as much anymore, I started to combine them. Specifically, I just mixed half of the micro pellet. So a handful of that and a handful of ground bait. And even though I was basically putting in the same thing as if I cast them separately, with the micro pellet at the bottom of the feeder and the top capped with bait, it still doesn't work the same way. It was simply better when the two were mixed together and they slowly sank to the very bottom together. And then after that, that dissolving momentum that was created by the mixture of these two worked well. It's incredible how success can depend on such tiny details, so you always have to experiment with these things too. The bait on the tray, the ground bait, can be used not just in one way, but in many different ways. Always try out all sorts of little mixes, carefully adding flavors to the ground bait or flavoring the filling. Something will eventually bring success. Speaking of flavoring, I experimented a lot with flavoring today. As you can see, that I used up quite a bit of this spray because I mainly insisted on using it since there were signs that the fish were staying mid-water or even closer to the surface. So I sprayed the flavoring on hoping it would bring them down to the bottom. But this didn't work so well, so I tried the gel as well, specifically by putting it on top of the bait, and instead of smearing it with my hand, I sprayed it, so to speak, over the surface, creating a nice layer of aroma. I'm sure that when it hit the water, some of the aroma was released mid-water as well, but since this is a heavy substance, it's likely that after the strong flavor, the fish just turned away. And I was able to lure fish down from the higher layers to the bottom. Of course, this is just my theory. It doesn't really matter why it worked. There's no need to explain it. It just worked, having this thick gel on the surface of the feeder. And so at the end of the day, when this all came together for me, from that point on, some nicer fish started to find the feeder. I thought about a lot of things this morning, but I never imagined I would catch such a big fish here at Lake Gyúró, even though I know there are fish this big in here, and obviously even bigger ones too, but that I would actually get lucky, well, I wouldn't have bet even 5 forints on that, especially considering how things were looking in the afternoon during that dead period. But eventually, as it should be, everything always falls into place, just as it was meant to. Sometimes more slowly, sometimes more quickly. Another thing that reveals the muddy bottom is how long the remarkably long whiskers of this beautiful carp are. If you take a closer look, you can actually see it quite clearly without any difficulty. That compared to the size of the fish, it has such drooping whiskers, almost like a little catfish mustache. This is because the mud is deep and it uses these to fill out snails and little critters in it. Since it is already a protected size, it definitely needs to be disinfected. Its mouth, so it is already a native inhabitant of this lake. Well, now I've applied it everywhere for it. As you can see, even on these association-managed waters, you can have unforgettable fishing experiences. The main thing is that you should always carefully move step by step towards the solution as well. What is the right solution and when are you heading in the right direction? Well, the fish will show you that, and give you the answer. Just like today, in this case as well, if you enjoyed it, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the Haldorado Fishing TV YouTube channel, where you can find more great content like this.